I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is a case of a consensual encounter involving some extremely kinky fetishes that turned deadly. And now an OnlyFans model is on trial for murder. Here is the story. It began as an ordinary booking in Escondido, California. An online message, a negotiated price, and a promise of pleasure behind closed doors. But what unfolded inside that quiet home became a nightmare no one could have imagined. Prosecutors say a 31-year-old mother who advertised fetish sessions online wrapped her client, Michael Dale, in plastic and duct tape, filming every moment until he stopped breathing. What she claimed was a consensual fantasy investigators call cold-blooded murder. Detectives say she showed little emotion even as paramedics fought to revive him. Now a courtroom will decide if this was a tragic accident born of obsession or a deliberate act of domination that crossed the line between fantasy and fatality. The haunting question that is lingering: how did a fetish become fatal? And this fatal fetish was really a business transaction, right? You've got a customer, Michael Dale, who gets in contact with a woman who he wants to engage in certain behavior with. And he was enticed, probably in part or large part by her physical appearance, which was very public. Take a look. This is what he was signing up for. This is part of the fantasy, the fetish. It went to a whole different level, right? This isn't a case of let's do a little role playing here. Things got much more extreme. And in the end, Michael Dale ends up dead. Now, I've got to think, you know, going into this transaction, that this was not the result that anyone wanted. Or maybe the defense will argue that's what the defendant wants. I don't know. But what is important is our first question of our investigation, to get into some of the details of this case and what happened. How did Michael Dale die? Need to get into some of the specific evidence and allegations here. Here to help with our investigation, former federal prosecutor, president of the West Coast Trial Lawyers, Nima Rahmani is with us, and clinical psychologist, gender, sex, and relationship diversity therapist, Dr. Lori Beth Bisbee is with us as well. Thank you both for being here. What I want to do for the folks at home is give them a few more of the details of this case as we hear it. The state, as they sort of lay out their case and their theory on what happened during this session that ended up with the death of Michael Dale.
There were several videos. The videos appeared to have been taken by Michaela in selfie mode. There were videos of her dancing to some music, topless. In the background for the first couple, you can see Michael Dale. He was, at that point, his hands or his wrists had been bound, and he had black duct tape over his hands, completely covering his hands. He was wrapped in Saran wrap. His thighs, from his thighs down, were wrapped in Saran wrap. I remember it looked like a piece of Saran wrap or plastic that was hanging around his shoulders loosely, almost like a sash. And he had black duct tape around his mouth, wrapped around his head.
In these videos, do we see anything actually covering his head or his face?
Well, the first two videos, he's got just the duct tape around it. And the subsequent videos I saw, he had several layers over his head.
And when you say layers, watching the videos, can you tell what layers or what objects those were?
It appeared that he still had the black duct tape around his mouth, a plastic bag over his head. Then what I believe was that a loose Saran wrap was wrapped around his face, as well as tied around his neck. And then there was some pink duct tape that was wrapped around his mouth all the way around his head. At one point she said, maybe I should tighten your neck up, and it looks like she reaches down and kind of hooks her finger underneath the plastic around his neck and tugs on it. And he's still struggling to breathe. You can see he's very labored, but big heavy breaths. He's snoring, which is a sign that he's not getting enough air. And you can see the bag kind of pulsing, sucking in and out against his face. Masturbating with a vibrator, lip syncing to the music. It pans down to Mr. Dale laying at her feet, motionless, still wrapped up the same exact way. Like she might have been resting her foot on it. Shows her face briefly, it pans down and shows Mr. Dale briefly laying motionless on the floor, and the majority of it is zoomed in on her crotch as she uses the vibrator.
Layers still present, covering his head.
They appear to.
Clip D, 9:56 p.m. Is that the first time we see the plastic, the tape, and the objects, layers, covering Mr. Dale's head?
Yes.
And the last video, clip H at 10:04 p.m., is that the last video where we see Mr. Dale in that same condition?
Yes.
About 8 minutes, is that fair?
Yes.
I could just hear him say, "Can we stop? I'll pay you a certain amount more money to stop." And that's when I realized that it wasn't a friend. I went into Michael Dale's room, and he was laying on the floor, not breathing. And that's when I was like, we need to call 911. Once we got them on, and they were given directions for CPR, Michaela started CPR.
You recognize that?
Yes, sir.
Is that a copy of your body work?
It is.
Is there anybody else in the house? Yeah, that ambulance is on the thing. Is he breathing? Speak time. Head back over there. Head back over there. She doesn't want to stop her answers.
Like this.
If you just wait outside, please.
Due to resuscitated cardiopulmonary arrest, essentially there was a lack of oxygen to the brain because of the plastic wrapping around the head, leading to fatal injury.
How about the manner of death?
Homicide.
The people aren't suggesting that this defendant had a specific intent to kill, but by analogy, this defendant didn't act that was so dangerous to human life, and she consciously disregarded that act and went forward with it anyway. The act or acts being placing numerous items over Mr. Dale's head after she had bound his hands and after she had tied his legs together with plastic wrap. As the court recalls, there were 4 layers of items. It wasn't just one plastic bag. First, it was the black duct tape. Second, it was the plastic bag. Third, it was the plastic wrap that was raised from the shoulders up to the neck area. And then finally, it was an additional layer of pink duct tape wrapped around Mr. Dale's head. And it wasn't just left there momentarily. By the videos and the timestamps, we know that these 4 layers were left there for at least 8 minutes.
A lot of this is caught on video. She's making a video for her OnlyFans page at the time. Nima Rahmani, when we think about how he died, these circumstances, what are the things that you heard that you think will be significant in figuring this out, like what the intent was, what exactly was going on between these two?
Vinny, there's 3 important legal principles in this case, and we're really talking about what should really a law school hypothetical. The first is medical causation, right? The defense is going to argue that Dale was intoxicated and that was the cause of death. I don't think they're going to get there because of the duct tape, the Saran wrap, and the plastic bag, but expect the defense to focus on causation. Next, the issue of consent, Vinny, and you can consent to an assault, but in states like California, you can't consent to a fatal injury like a homicide. And of course, we know intent is everything in the case. And you saw the prosecutor talk about it. Obviously, murder can be intent to kill, an intent to inflict serious bodily harm, but a deliberate indifference to human life. And that's what this case is going to come down to. We saw the prelim, but they got to get 12 out of 12 with the jury.
All right, Dr. Bisbee, what did you hear? What is going on in this whole scenario? She comes over and he wants all these things done to him.
It sounds like it wasn't a well-formed out scenario in the first place, and that she really didn't know what she was doing. Not that there's any safe way to do this. There is not. Also, with his level of intoxication, he wouldn't have been in any position to give any kind of recognizable consent anyway. He was too intoxicated to consent. given what the medical examiner said about the level of alcohol in his blood. So I think she may have been seduced by the money, and this was his fantasy, and she kind of put it together as best she could. That's what I hear.
Nima, let's talk about a jury listening to this, right? You mentioned you got to get all 12. How do they assess the conduct here? This is conduct that is different, right? Not everyone does it. It's not extremely unusual. It's not like it never happens. It obviously happens. But there's a lot of people who don't engage in anything even close to this. How do they evaluate the victim versus the defendant in this scenario?
Vinny, this is really a case unlike any other, and I know the jury pool there very well. I was a prosecutor in San Diego on the federal side, so it's a conservative jury pool, which can really cut both ways. On one hand, they tend to be pro-prosecution, but again, here's someone from a very wealthy city, Escondido, in Southern California, who's paying $11,000 to have this done to him. Now, I'm not saying anyone deserves to die, but I think he's not going to be as sympathetic as your typical murder victim, because the defense is going to argue this is what he wanted, and he kept asking for more, and he kept asking for more, and this was a sexual fetish that turned him on, and she didn't intend to do this. I'm not saying that's going to carry the day, but there's a lot of cases we cover here on court TV, Vinny, and I feel like it's just a gimme for the prosecution. I'm not so sure in this particular case.
Dr. Bisbee, what do you think drove the victim here to want this to be done, and other things? Like he wanted his eyes glued shut forever so she would be the last thing that he ever saw.
That's really extreme. We normally don't see that. Somebody wanting their eyes glued shut is something that I don't think I've ever heard before, and I've heard a lot. The being mummified, which is what Saran wrap all over the body was, and the degrees of asphyxiation, which we would normally call breath play, is much more common. So it's hard to know what was really driving him and how much understanding he had of the difference between fantasy and these extreme things as he was discussing and what would actually happen if he engaged in them. I don't know enough about him to really know whether there was any kind of underlying death wish on his part. There may have been. But he certainly wanted an extreme degree of humiliation and an extreme degree of sadism. But I suspect that it was more fantastical and that he didn't really have a sense of what it would be like once it was actually happening. And often fantasies, when they're acted out, are not nearly as much fun as when they are in your mind.
All right, Dr. Bisbee's going to stay with us. Nima Romani, thank you so much. Now, this defendant is happily married. Coming up next, how did the Rylaarsdams make this relationship work so well?
Michaela was sending pictures and videos to Brandon, kind of showing him what was happening.
Maybe more akin to someone who's holding a large boulder over a freeway overpass and dropping it over, saying, let's see what happens. I believe, based on a probable cause standard, she can be bound over and she'll have to be held to answer for murder.
That's the judge making the announcement that the case will be going to trial, the case against Michaela Rylaarsdam. So what's interesting here, and it might surprise some people, it might not surprise others, but Michaela is a husband. His name is Brandon. And while all this is going on and she's putting on her show and doing the entire thing with the victim in this case, she is communicating with her husband, who knows exactly what she's doing. Take a listen.
There was a call between or from Michaela to her husband, Brandon, prior to the 911 call.
Were there texts between the defendant and her husband, Brandon, during this incident?
Yes.
And were those of evidentiary value?
Yes.
Can you briefly give us a snapshot overview of the nature of the text between the defendant and her husband during this time frame?
It appeared that Michaela was sending pictures and videos to Brandon, kind of showing him what was happening, and Brandon was kind of expressing his shock at, this is crazy what's happening. At one point, I believe it's when Mr. Dale was asking to be released for $1,000. I'm not sure but there was a point where Brandon was going, oh yeah, get it, or something similar to that, telling her how great she was for doing it. This is going to go in our book, that type of thing. Later, towards the time frame that we saw those videos of Michaela masturbating, there was a text message from Brandon where he asked, is he breathing? And then I think that's probably when Michaela checked and saw that he wasn't. The next is at 10:02 p.m., which reads, are you for me right now?
And how about Brandon's text after that?
Just a few seconds later, he wrote, I want to you so badly. Wow.
Okay, brings us to the next question in our investigation, and it's about Michaela and Brandon. How did the Rylaarsdams make this relationship work so well? It seemed like they were very happy, even that night. Here to help us with that question, OnlyFans creator Marie D is with us, and clinical psychologist, gender, sex, and relationship diversity therapist, Dr. Lori Beth Bisbee as well. Great to have you both here. All right, Marie, let me start with you. My understanding, last time we spoke, I thought you mentioned that you're in a happy relationship. You're on OnlyFans. How do you make these relationships work so well?
So for me, OnlyFans is a career, and I am able to create a work-life balance just like anybody does with a career. Now, I will say when you are in an industry like this one, you do not have a conventional relationship. You have to be open and accepting of these different standards in your relationship, like talking to men, interacting with men, sharing sexual images with them, and things like that. Now, this model obviously took that to a different extreme. OnlyFans does not allow, meetups, and they absolutely do not allow the abuse that occurred. So she definitely took her role as a creator to a different extreme that I'm not sure my relationship personally would ever withstand. But just like anyone with a job, you simply need to create a balance and communicate and make it work for you both and have an open mind.
Dr. Bisbee, what are your thoughts about this relationship? Michaela and Brandon seemed like they were very happy, and this actually kind of added a little something to the, a little spice.
Yeah, I mean, from the text, it sounds like her husband was enjoying some of the things that she did, and that likely this was part of their relationship, that part of the way they managed this was to include her other situations in their sexual relationship. And there are quite a few couples who do that, who are non-monogamous. But there's also the career aspect of this, so it makes it a little bit more difficult to figure out exactly what was going on. Clearly, they also had this business and were invested in whatever the next steps for the business was.
Marie, are you shocked about the extreme that she went to? And I ask that because it's beyond, right? It's beyond the norm, as you explained, in OnlyFans. It's not even part of that. But are you surprised that someone who has an OnlyFans presence needed to go to that extreme?
It's really unfortunate that she felt the need to go to this extreme because, like I was saying, OnlyFans doesn't permit any activities like this. They don't even allow you to talk to your fans about meeting up. So as a creator, I see a lot of red flags that she definitely knew were not allowed on the platform. And I think that's where the greed came into the situation, where she saw the monetary offer. She's probably not making that amount on OnlyFans in a month. I would at least hope not, for accepting such a gruesome proposal, because from the start it was gruesome. And if I'm correct, it was an $11,000 offer. So that's a fraction of what someone like me or another successful creator is making in a month. So there was probably a big gap in her salary as far as what she's making on OnlyFans that enticed her to accept that. And how gruesome it got was just something I could never imagine. And I think that's something that is going to be extremely hard to defend. Accepting this sort of meetup, knowing what he wanted, is just sad and terrifying. So as a creator, I don't understand how she even entertained his messages, let alone let it get to this point where he is now dead.
Dr. Bisbee, how about the perspective of Brandon, the husband? What sort of insight into a personality that is into this? And how do you think, how does that play at home, right, in terms of the relationship and the power in the relationship?
It seemed like from the text messages, he was into the fact that she had control over this guy and into what she was able to bring home, the fact that she was being powerful and she was earning the money and that it was going to benefit them. It didn't seem like there was necessarily a large power imbalance between them, but it was certainly something that was a turn on. It's possible that he was calling the shots behind the scenes, but I don't have enough information to really make that as a firm conclusion, but it's possible that's part of what was going on.
Sure, it could be part of what comes out during the trial. All right, our guests are staying with us. Still to come, is she just doing it for the money? I'm Vinny Politan. We continue our investigation of the case of a kinky consensual encounter that turned deadly, resulting in an OnlyFans model charged with murder. Here's the story.
Behind the blinds of a suburban home in Escondido, California, a deadly secret unraveled. What was meant to be a private fetish session ended with 36-year-old Michael Dale's lifeless body encased in plastic wrap, duct tape, and silence. The woman at the center, a mother who made her living online, insists it was a role play gone wrong. But prosecutors say the evidence tells a darker story. A camera rolling, a man gasping for air, and a chilling calm from the woman accused. Investigators uncovered messages, payments, and preparations suggesting this encounter was planned down to the minute. As the murder trial looms, the defense paints her as a performer trapped in a dangerous illusion, while the state calls it premeditated cruelty. In a world where fantasy blurs with reality, one haunting question remains. When does consent end and murder begin?
This session, again, is transactional in nature, right? I'm hiring you to do something. Take a listen to Detective Chris Zach testifying about just how much money we are talking about here.
Were you able to glean, based on your examination of the defendant's phone, whether Mr. Dale actually made payments to the defendant?
Yes.
One payment, several payments?
No, there were several payments made.
What was the grand total?
Just over $11,000. Her and her husband have a company of strippers that they send out strippers. She started advertising, I think it was on Eros.com, and Mr. Dale contacted her through that.
Eros, is that EROS.com?
Correct.
And were you able to look into the website? Are you able to tell us what it is?
Yeah, it's like technically a dating website, but it's used for all kinds of things.
So it's interesting here now, when you talk about the defendant, Michaela Rylaarsdam, OnlyFans model, but her and her husband have a stripper company that advertises as well, some sort of a dating get-together site as well, right? But all of it kind of leaning in one direction, in one, type of behavior that is for everyone. It's not for everyone, but it's for a lot of people because obviously there's a lot of money exchanging hands here. So it was $11,000 for this session, plus all the other work that she is doing. Brings us to the next question in our investigation. Is she just doing it for the money? Is it just about the money because the money can be good? Or is there something else about her personality that makes her want to do this? Is it part of her DNA to be involved in this type of profession and this type of behavior? Here to help with our investigation, OnlyFans creator Marie D back with us, as well as clinical psychologist, gender, sex, and relationship diversity therapist, Dr. Lori Beth Bisbee. So let's talk about this for a second. And I'll begin with you, Marie. Obviously, your work is not to the extreme of what this defendant was into. But from your perspective, is this something, a career choice you made because of just the money?
For me, it absolutely was a financial decision, the majority of the decision. But at the same time, it's such a specific industry and a specific career that you have to be okay with putting yourself out there literally in every sense of the phrase. So for me, it absolutely was about the money. Now, in this case, you couldn't offer me $50 million to do the things that this woman performed on the victim. So I think the prosecution is going to be able to illustrate that and say very few people on this earth would go to that extreme. So she takes fault and needs to take accountability for that 100%. But in this case, knowing that her husband had this business, she was an OnlyFans model, she seems like she was just trying to use sex work to get whatever money she could. And it did seem like she was enjoying what she was doing along the way, because many people wouldn't even do that for the largest sum of money offered to them.
Yeah. Dr. Bisbee, what are your thoughts here about, is she doing it just for the money?
I doubt it's just for the money. I think that there are very few people who will do this who are just in straight sex work. And from the looks of it, the rest of what she did was sort of straight sex work. Well, it appears that she was getting some pleasure out of it. The pleasure might have been related to taking money off of him, to the power that that gave her, rather than actual sexual pleasure at the thought of the acts. But I doubt it's as straightforward as saying, yeah, this is just for the money.
I want to play something else for everyone, because I think this is also interesting insight into the defendant. This is a video that Michaela seemingly posted online about her business interests. The ex-user Colin Rugg posted it after this happened to the victim. Let's take a look.
This is the year of business. Everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, and we get that. I've never felt that everybody was meant to be a stripper forever. I know that this is something where you get in and you get out. You need people in your corner to help you grow. I did, and so I know what that means for our girls. I know what that means for our guys.
What are your thoughts here, Marie? It seems like that's part of the sales pitch to get women to strip. You get in, you get out, it's entrepreneurship. What's your reaction to that?
My reaction is that it is something I see quite often as a successful, established, and independent model in the OnlyFans world. There are different agencies that try to come in and prey on these girls. And what they'll do is put a female at the forefront of their social media advertisements, much like what this woman did here. And it's a very manipulative tactic to kind of lure girls in and make it seem like, hey, I'm offering you a solution to the work you're doing right now. And then little do they know that they're going to actually still be doing sex work, probably working more hours, and a large chunk of their income is actually going to go to her company. So this is another red flag about this creator for me, for sure.
Incredible insight tonight. Marie D., always great to have you on the show. Dr. Lori Beth Bisbee, thank you so much. All right, coming up next, how will the victim's consent impact the trial?
Was there any evidence suggesting that he asked her to obstruct his breathing in any way?
No.
Clearly, this is a tragic accident. I'm heartened to see that the people are not arguing first. They're not showing that there's any intention by Ms. Rylaarsdam to kill Mr. Dale. I don't think there's any evidence of that. I think to the contrary, she tried to save him. With regard to a conscious disregard, the people bring up a DUI. Well, that's why we have a Watson advisor, is to put people on notice, because there has to be a conscious disregard. What we have here is she's saying he's sleeping. We hear snoring. You know, the detective says, yeah, that's what that comes from, is from a lack of oxygen. He's been doing this long enough that he can know that when asphyxiation cases, that happens. But your average person would think that that was sleeping. He also comes up, and that's consistent that she says that he's snoring. He also wakes up. The bag has holes on it. It's role playing. There's no conscious disregard for human life on her part in this. It's a tragic accident.
And one of the arguments about the accident is that there's, some level of agreement here, right? There was he was hiring her to do a certain thing, and there were some agreements back and forth. So I want you to take a listen to the detective talk about some of the communications between the defendant and the victim in this case, and how this was supposed to go down, what he wanted done.
Did you subsequently obtain a search warrant to search the contents of that cell phone?
Yes.
Did you find anything helpful to your investigation?
Yes.
Let's start with some text messages. Did you see any text messages in there that were helpful to your investigation?
Yes.
Were there text messages between the defendant and Mr. Michael Dale?
Yes.
We're going to go through some of those texts, but before we do, can you just give us an overview snapshot? What was the nature of the messages back and forth?
The nature of it was Mr. Dale asking Ms. Rylaarsdam to do certain things for him. He was asking her to buy boots and glue them on his feet with Gorilla Glue. He was asking her to buy dildos and glue them in his mouth. And he also asked her to pour pools of Gorilla Glue into his eyes to glue them shut so that she was the last girl that he would ever see.
And based on these text messages, were you able to tell whether Mr. Dale was offering money in exchange for these acts?
Yes, I believe he was going to offer some money. I don't remember how much at this time. So it's an incoming text from Michael Dale to Ms. Rylaarsdam.
Thank you. You said it's a picture of dildos?
It's a advertisement on Etsy to buy for $36.
Can you read the next text message for us at the very bottom of page 1?
It's also incoming from Mr. Dale, and it says, I was thinking of something like this, say 6 inches long, that you could put down my throat before you glue my mouth shut. So does that mean you will truly and honestly put a pool of Gorilla Glue in each eye to make it truly permanent for me, my sexy angel?
And the fourth text, was this the defendant's response to that?
Yes, it's an outgoing text message from Michaela Rylaarsdam to Michael Dale at 12:13 p.m. And it says, I will do whatever we put into writing to be signed, Dollface.
Based on your investigation, was there any evidence at all suggesting that Michael Dale wanted the defendant to kill him?
No.
Was there any evidence suggesting that he asked her to obstruct his breathing in any way?
No.
Was there any evidence suggesting that he asked her to put tape over his mouth?
No.
Was there any evidence suggesting that he asked her to put the plastic bag over his head?
No.
Prosecutors very specific in asking those questions about what there was no evidence of. Well, the defendant could testify about some of that and provide evidence. We'll see if that happens. There's also talk of a written contract that has never been found. But there was an agreement to some very extreme behavior, which brings us to the next question in our investigation. How will the victim's consent impact the trial? Here to help us answer that question, California criminal defense attorney Joanna Nieves and California criminal defense attorney Diane Bass. Two Californians with us. Awesome. All right, Joanne, I'll begin with you. How does this issue of consent play in this case?
Hi, Benny. So consent is not a get out of jail free card. What we're going to see here is that this will be considered when it comes to the requisite mental state that she had. So you can't consent to a fatal injury. And here, the jury will be able to consider whether or not she was acting with the impression that this was a safe activity, that she didn't recognize how dangerous it was, and whether the prosecution is going to be able to establish that there was implied malice. So the consent will be relevant to that nature, but it doesn't take the crime itself off of the table. And I think what we're going to see the defense doing, and even the prosecution, is relying on expert testimony to establish what normal standard practices were for people engaged in this type of activity, and whether she went beyond kind of like negotiated terms within this type of role play.
Yeah, I think we've had some of those experts on our show previously on some other cases we've been covering. All right, Diane, let's talk about consent. Maybe not consent to end a life, but he's talking about consenting to gluing his eyes shut, the last person he'll ever see. The issue about consenting to the plastic bag that has holes in it, to me, is a huge deal. What if she gets up on the witness stand and talks about all of that stuff and says, yeah, this is what he wanted, this is what we talked about?
Well, I think as your earlier guest mentioned, that agreeing to engage in this kind of conduct, pouring Gorilla Glue in somebody's eyes, is quite extreme, obviously very, very outrageous behavior. And anybody who would agree to this, I don't understand why she would agree to this, unless this was a pretense where she was saying, sure, I'll agree to it, but then she had no intention of doing it. But the question of the plastic bag, I think, is sort of a red herring, because he asked her to put a dildo down his throat and glue his mouth shut. And that is essentially asking somebody to suffocate you. But again, I agree that you cannot consent to murder. So if somebody were terminally ill, for instance, and they ask their spouse to give them a fatal dose of barbiturates, that spouse is going to be convicted of murder, whether the person consented to it or not. So this is a very interesting, twisting and turning fact pattern.
To say the least, right? Joanna, let me ask you, if in fact the victim here, Michael Dale, is under the influence, does that impact the issue of consent? And does that put more of a burden on the defendant if he's exhibiting behavior of being under the influence?
I think we're in the same boat where at the end of the day, he can't even consent to what occurred. Many of the negotiations between them happened prior to this night. So a lot of the consent that we're talking about for the sex acts and the fetish activities were done by text message prior to this incident. And there's no indication that he was under the influence at that time when they were establishing the initial terms. But when he arrived, whether he was under the influence or not, she definitely stepped into a realm of crossing the boundaries of into a dangerous act that was risky and reckless toward human life.
We have about 20 seconds left here, Diane. Will there be a detailed voir dire of jurors about their own conduct, or is that going to be off limits, you think?
Oh, no, I think that everything is on the table here, and I think that there is going to be a lot of sidebar or chambers discussions with potential jurors about any kind of sexual proclivities that they may have.
That's taking your civic duty to another level, to say the least. Joanna, Nieves, and Diane Bass, great to have you as our California experts tonight. We really appreciate it. Thanks so much. This case obviously involves a level of shock and behavior that many people are not familiar with. It's a big part of the story and will be the biggest issue at trial. The question, though, that I have for this jury is, will they be able to look past the kink and focus on what every jury has to focus on in a criminal case, which are the facts, the law, and specifically the simple elements of the crime? I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.
Don't forget to like and share this video, and for more legal insights, keep watching and subscribe to our channel.